introduce, I'll have to be very quick. We've got a great lineup of speakers. My name is David Aiken. I'm the CEO of National Road Carriers, and I'm also privileged to be able to introduce a great lineup of speakers for you today. We have Nikki Wright from Wright Communicate, our PR company, Wright Communications, speaking on sustainability. We have Linda Wright, the CEO of Hydrogen New Zealand, Sam Donaldson, Senior Project Engineer EVs at Waste Management, Mike Bennett, CEO of Z Energy, Peter Thuron, Senior Manager for Daimler Truck and Bus BNZ, Basil Issa from ECA, and we've got Nick Leggett here, the CEO of the Road Transport Forum. And I'd also like to acknowledge Rosie Mercer, who's the Hydrogen Project Manager at the Ports of Auckland, who is here today. And a special thanks goes to Teletrack Navman for their sponsorship of today's breakfast, so thank you very much. At the end, we will have a Q&A session, so we'll save the questions for the speakers to the end when we'll get them up here, and please think of some good questions of the sort of thing that you want to know about each of these food sources. Since last year, the association has looked to take a leading role on sustainability and environmental issues. The road freight sector we see as a very responsible and professional industry, so it's great to have your support here today. The aim of today is to give you a clear picture of what the future holds for each fuel source, the rate of change, how realistic each are in order to help you understand and start thinking about future decisions. Before I bring Nikki up, I'd like just to make a few comments. Firstly, the government has set a target of zero carbon emissions by 2050. With transport making up about 20% of New Zealand's greenhouse gas emissions, we need to be looking seriously at the options if we are to do our part in reaching this target. Secondly, we are living in a time of rapid change. This is nothing new. These are two pictures of New York's Fifth Avenue. The first one's in 1900, that is filled with horse-drawn carriages and one motor car. The other, 13 years later, is the exact opposite, the street filled with automobiles and one horse-drawn carriage. We are potentially looking at changes of a similar magnitude. And thirdly, this change is not going to dissipate. We need to face up to it and deal with it, which is why I'm so delighted we have so many people here today. The government has made it clear that they are committed to reducing carbon emissions, and they are setting up structures to achieve that. I believe Nikki's going to run through what they are. Places like Japan and the European community are way ahead of us, and there's a real risk we could be left behind. Next year's Olympics in Tokyo are going to be a showcase for hydrogen-powered transport, with Toyota being one of the companies leading the charge. Which brings me to my fourth point, and this can be a win-win. If we make this transition to a reduced carbon emission world in a smart way, we can do better economically as well as environmentally. We have people in our membership who are quietly moving to sustainability, not because they're trying to save the world, but because they see it as a competitive advantage. Others, like the Ports of Auckland, TIL Group, are working in the hydrogen space. Foodstuffs, Waste Management, and I hear TIL again, are running electric trucks because they see this as the future, so it is doable. When it comes to reducing NZ's carbon footprint, although transport is one of the biggest emitters, it's actually one of the easiest to deal with. So we are making it our mission at National Road Carriers to lead the way on this. Our aim is to give you the information, the inspiration, and the confidence you need to make the decisions and changes that will be better for the future generations and better for your business. Let me now introduce Nikki Wright from Wright Communications, who has been one of the driving forces, so to speak, for National Road Carriers to get cracking on sustainability. Nikki's PR business is focused on sustainability. She is a member of the Sustainable Business Council, the Sustainable Business Network, and counts Toyota which has the most self-charging electric hybrids in New Zealand, on New Zealand roads among her clients. Nikki attended last week's Climate Leaders Coalition conference that was all about enabling companies to take positive actions to reduce their carbon emissions. Exactly what we're doing here today, so please join me in welcoming Nikki.
Kia ora koutou and good morning everybody. So as David mentioned, I've been in this space for a while. I set up my company 13 years ago and Toyota was my very first client. I then actually worked with Mainfreight and I think there's someone from Mainfreight here today. So we actually worked with the team there to help work out what the carbon footprint or inventory of that business was. And then submitted what at the time was one of New Zealand's first carbon disclosure projects inventory. So we are also supporting companies like Urgent Couriers, so New Zealand's first carbon neutral courier firm. And we just like telling stories that help encourage to do the right thing, and companies that are struggling with the quite large emitters to have that social licence to operate. So ultimately we need to protect our climate by reducing our emissions, and we know that the transport sector is one of the fastest growing areas for emissions. In addition, it's accounting for nearly 20% of all carbon emissions produced in this country. So if we take a quick look at New Zealand's inventory, gross emissions in the OECD, we're ranked about 24th. Not so bad. But if you take it a bit, if you look at it per person basis, we're actually seventh highest emitter in OECD, which is nothing to be proud of. This is just a snapshot of New Zealand's inventory, and you can see half of it is agriculture, but the transport sector is sitting around 19.7%, so we talk about it as being about 20% of the inventory. So as David said though, it's one of the easiest to do something about. I've just got up here a little snapshot of the trucking fleet in New Zealand using the latest data, which is from the Ministry of the Environment. You can see that there's negligible petrol trucks on the road and predominantly diesels, as at 2017 there it was about 140,000. And then I know between then and 2019 we've now got 140 electric trucks on the road. So thanks to foodstuffs, waste management and other early adopters. For some of the urban deliveries, of course. So the government has sort of laid out a bit of a plan for how we're going to get to this net zero future in 2050, and they've set 3 different targets. So next year we're going to see if we've met our 5% below 1990 levels target, and by all intents and purposes it looks like we're going to get there. Then again in 2030 they'll check in, and we're looking to reduce that down to about 30% below 2005 levels, which in real terms is about 11% below 1990 levels. And then hopefully by 2050 we will become net zero, so that'll be reducing it further to 50% below 1990 levels. So those are the targets that the government is looking to hit. This zero carbon bill is underway, and out of that we'll see a climate change commission which will then review that 2050 target in 2024 and just check that we're on track and has to be readjusted. So this here is just another summary of the emissions profiles, just to give you some further context. In the energy portion, I've just highlighted the transport input to that, and just put in the 1990 figures for transport alone, which were 8.8 million tonnes. And then you can see by 2050, to get to net zero, which is the government's target, we're going to have to drop those down to 3.9 million tonnes. So in 1990, it was 8.8 million, and in 2050, we're hoping to get to 3.9. So we're talking about significant change. Here's another way of looking at it. The black line up the top there is sort of tracking the actual emissions out of the sector, and then to get to where we need to be in 2050, there's quite it's not a cliff face, but it's a confronting image to get our heads around. And smart companies are looking at the targets along the way and building business cases to meet each of those targets and thinking about what do we need to do to get there. And this is driving a bunch of innovation. So the zero carbon bill is running along in the background at the moment, and we're hoping this will have some teeth. We're hoping it'll be bipartisan. We're hoping it will be something that's enshrined and that future governments will need to adhere. It's basically within the select committee stage, and there's a whole lot of companies who have submitted submissions to the process. In fact, I think they were quite overwhelmed with the response they received. I might forget my numbers, but I think it was north of 10,000 individual company and organisation submissions. And I believe that is about 58 days worth of hearings, individual hearings, because so many companies wanted to actually front up and deliver their submission in person. So there's huge passion, and it's across all spectrums of business as well. Really, the purpose of the bill is to provide a framework. Let's get things clear. Let's make it stable. Business needs certainty. Let's find out what climate change policies are that can contribute to the global effort under the Paris Agreement, which we have signed up to limit the global average temperature increase to 1.5% Celsius above pre-industrial levels. So what does this all mean? I think what we're looking at is things are revving up. That's why I call this presentation things are revving up. I think they are. I think things are getting to a point where we're going to see more targets. I think early movers are going to be rewarded. Certainly the companies that are scrutinising their supply chain and are looking for who's going to help me get where I need to go, you're going to be wanting to partner with freight companies who are on that journey with them. I know for our business, we're a very small business. We only have about 15 tonnes of carbon that we put out. We're an office in town. But we need to be carbon neutral, and we need to make sure that we're continuously reducing our output and get that down to within 1.5%. So to get there, we want to partner with freight companies who are going to deliver our goods in a neutral manner. And certainly bigger business is looking at that too, or at least give me the data, because I'm producing a carbon inventory. I need the data from you. So there's a little bit of admin in the back there to provide figures to customers. Consumers are all about this. There's been numerous studies now that show that consumers really do care, and they want to partner with business and buy from businesses who are doing the right thing in this space. So early movers will be rewarded. There's going to be increased cost to business. We know price of fuel's going up, there's even more taxes. So maybe one day soon the alternatives are actually going to look more economically viable. So I think we're starting to get educated now, so we know what those options are and what the cost will be and whether it's viable. Interesting also to have Vika with us today, because I believe there are some funding streams of the pilots available, so it'd be good to hear more about that and understand what is available for business who wants to trial some of these things. So I think that's a bit of context, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks, Thanks, Nikki. Next, I'm going to ask Dr. Linda Wright, the CEO of Hydrogen New Zealand, to come up. Linda would have to be one of the most passionate, approachable and articulate advocates for alternative fuel source anywhere on the planet. When we approached her to speak for this forum, she jumped at the opportunity and it's been super helpful, even flying here from Queenstown at her own expense. No?
Associations expense.
Well, and she didn't ask us to cover it, which is great.
That'll be a reciprocal
Yeah.
deal.
Dr. Wright.
Oh, well.
Travels the world looking for hydrogen and has just returned from the Hydrogen Fuel Conference and meetings in Japan and Korea. She brings that knowledge and insight to us here today. Please welcome Dr. Linda Wright.
So, let's just have a look. I just wanted to give some context. Oh my God, I feel like I'm on X Factor doing this. Let's just give some context to where we're at in New Zealand in terms of our energy. So, as you know, we are, I feel like we reign supreme globally with our capacity to create renewable energy, and that's one of the fundamental things why hydrogen presents New Zealand with a particular opportunity. So we're third in the world in terms of our current capacity with renewable electricity, and that's critical for us going forward. And so we come third after Norway and Iceland. 85% is our current portion of renewables for electricity, and it's obviously, as you know, hydro, geothermal and wind. We've also got 50% of that existing generation, which is consented going forward, and it's just sitting there, consented, but nobody's bringing it online because we've got flatline domestic demand for our renewable capacity. So that's quite an interesting thing for New Zealand too. And the other thing is that in terms of our ability to generate more renewables going forward, wind is completely our underutilised resource. So as we all know, we're particularly windy here in New Zealand, but it's only currently sort of 2 or 3% of our existing renewable capacity. So globally, lots of countries are looking at where our renewable resource generation opportunity is going forward, and wind and geothermal is definitely it. Let's see. There you go. Oh, no, one. There you go. That's relevant for you. So in terms of our total energy use, not just our electricity, 40% of our total energy use as a country is electricity. So 60% of our total energy consumption is actually fossil fuels, and that is predominantly driven by our industrial process heat requirements, particularly around drying milk products for export, but of course we've got a huge transport need for fossil fuels. And again, if you look at our total energy consumption, it's the fossil fuel portion that's growing, which is being driven by our economic development, both with its implications for increased transport with our tourism and our freight needs, and also with that economic growth and our export potential, particularly around milk solids, etc. So that's where the growth is. When it comes to transport, you'll be more familiar with this. Domestic transport accounts for 82% of our demand for our oil products. 90% of transport is used in road, and freight transport is expected to increase by 48% to 2042. And so these are ENVI figures, and sort of this gives you a bit of a backdrop as to why the government are focused particularly on heavy freight movements and also on the way that we move our tourism. Industry, process heat makes up 33% of our total energy use, and 60% of the process heat is used in coal and gas currently. So that again gives you a framework of what focus is to transition to a low emission economy going forward. It's going to be process heat and transport, particularly heavy fleets, heavy vehicles. So the New Zealand renewable energy opportunity. So again, New Zealand's a growing economy. The growing energy demand is transport and industrial process heat, which is currently driven by fossil fuel feedstocks. Significant existing renewable energy generation exists, and we've got abundant potential to bring more renewable capacity online going forward. However, we've got flatline demand. Essentially what we need to do is to create additional demand for our renewable capacity to bring that consented generation opportunity online. So if you look at a country, lovely New Zealand, and what seems to be unfolding in terms of how we transition to a low emission economy, I've got a 20-year background in delivering infrastructure and new services across the waste sector, both in the UK and for the last 16 years in New Zealand. And what tends to happen, observing these sectors that are trying to bring around transformative change across the domestic, commercial and industrial sectors, is you transition not from a predominant reliance on one solution, such as fossil fuel consumption or whether it's landfill disposal. You don't go from one and then you transition to another solution. You transition to a range of integrated solutions. And so in my view, what we need to do in New Zealand to transition us to a low emission economy, and this is our total energy system, is we need a range of solutions. So I'm convinced, based on my long protracted history of delivering change, is that we'll have biofuels, we'll have EVs, we'll have hydrogen, and what you're looking for is what are the operational advantages of each of those, and where are the boundaries where they become unaffordable in terms of from an investment perspective or a consumer perspective, and where do you then transition onto the next alternative fuel solution that has the operational advantages and the cost parity to progress. So it'll be all of the opportunities and solutions you'll see today, but for different uses in different scenarios, which makes it challenging from an investment perspective, because the reality is it'll be horses for courses. It won't be one wins out, because we can't. I'll go on. Let me keep on while I'm on a roll. Okay, and the hydrogen opportunity for New Zealand is both to transition us to a low emission economy domestically, and undoubtedly there is a huge potential for us for export. The other thing about hydrogen is that it offers a range of solutions, not for mobility. And what New Zealand will do is hop on the back of the unprecedented massive investment that's happening globally in hydrogen, and that's the opportunity for us. I think we've done that one. So what I've spent, increasingly spending a large proportion of my time doing is pitching for New Zealand globally on a global scale, and I find that very easy to do. I'm extremely passionate about New Zealand. I think it's incredible. And it's very easy for me to talk about New Zealand, and I've just come back from these G20 meetings in Japan and an international hydrogen conference organised by the Korean government, and then I'm speaking at the global, the World Energy Congress that's going to be in Abu Dhabi in September. And one thing that's great for us as a country is we are committed to having bipartisan agreement across the political spectrum. And just on the back of the meetings in Japan and Korea, one thing that became very apparent to me is polarizing global investors on the hydrogen front is they see Australia, interestingly, as a sovereign risk because there isn't cohesion interstate, and as a national government, there isn't cohesion around their climate change policies. And so that's seen as a risk, and that's something that we can stand up and be compelling about, which is our government's position in terms of bilateral commitments to climate change going forward. And so that's going to help us in terms of developing those global relationships. So when you look at our targets, I won't dwell on these because Nikki, who looks like my daughter, has already covered them all. And one thing that's helpful is that we've got some policies, and we've got a green hydrogen paper which is currently with ministers and is going to come out for public consultation in the next month. We've got a review currently underway of our regulatory framework, looking at what standards we would adopt, international standards for hydrogen that we would adopt here. So there's some helpful work underway from a government perspective, and of course we've got some funding opportunities the various projects that are sort of at various stages of delivery are participating in. Okay, so why hydrogen? It offers twofold opportunities predominantly, which is to assist in the decarbonisation of our domestic economy, and also from us participating on a global scale as part of the global export commodity, which hydrogen will undoubtedly become. I have absolutely, it's so compelling when you sort of start having dialogue on a global scale, because of there is trillions of dollars being invested on progressing a new global export commodity for hydrogen, and the world is looking for renewable hydrogen, of which we can be a player in. And so that's the additional opportunity that hydrogen offers New Zealand. The other thing that when it comes to hydrogen, it's already a huge industry. I mean, even in New Zealand, we already produce lots of hydrogen from steam origination, it's used ubiquitously globally. And the existing quantity of hydrogen that's produced from steam reformation globally currently produces the equivalent emissions of Indonesia and the UK. That's an indication of the scale of the existing global hydrogen industry. So this is not new. The other opportunity that hydrogen is sort of provides is it provides an opportunity to decarbonise industries that are difficult to decarbonise through electrification, and that's the steel, cement, and chemical industries, and obviously mobility. So the other thing that it offers New Zealand is an opportunity to assist where we've got transmission constraints or electricity generation challenges. Hydrogen, sort of Transpower and our electricity generators are looking at hydrogen at where it can facilitate and assist us to decarbonise, or where they've got particular constraints where there's high winter demand, such as Queenstown, for example. It also gives individual companies an opportunity to generate distributed fuel, which is really attractive to some of the members of the association, and I could go on, but I'm going to run out of time. So here we go, the New Zealand Hydrogen Association, which I launched in September with 9 founding members, and now we're at 33. So we've got the Richardson Group, they've got a director on the board of the association. The Alexander Group is another transport company that they're licensed to BOC. They already move hydrogen around New Zealand. The association represents a full cross-section of the New Zealand economy, and all of our universities are members too. So the aim of the association is to facilitate cooperation and collaboration with members to deliver refuelling infrastructure. And as I said, another part of my role is to engage with the global leaders of hydrogen infrastructure and to incentivise them to come to New Zealand with their infrastructure. And there are a whole range of reasons why they should come here, but that's part of my the value that I guess I bring to New Zealand is to picture us globally with these international investors and developers of the technology. The other opportunity for New Zealand is from an R&D base for us to be at the forefront. We're a very innovative country, and we need to be at the forefront of what's unfolding. So that just develops new opportunities for us as a country. And also the other thing about hydrogen is it gives us an opportunity to prevent stranded assets where we've got existing oil and gas capability and skill sets. And that existing infrastructure can be used for hydrogen, particularly to develop export potential. So it plays a whole raft, and that's why the hydrogen opportunity is an attractive proposition, not just for decarbonising mobility. But so if you look at there's about 10 hydrogen projects in New Zealand that are currently being progressed at various stages. So one is, and all of this is public knowledge, the Turapaki Trust in Central North Island partnered with Obayashi Corporation, a huge Japanese conglomerate, and that's to progress green hydrogen export from geothermal. First Gas is looking at putting green hydrogen into the gas reticulation network. There's Hiringa Energy, which is a private sector company that's been established. It's got provincial growth funding, and they're looking at there's a transport proportion. So there's a heavy vehicle fleet proportion to most of these projects. Refining New Zealand, they're looking at a project to decarbonise an existing hydrogen generation at the port. Of course, we've got Lovely Rosie, and there's a bus component to that joint venture with Auckland Transport and Kiwi Rail and Ports of Auckland and Auckland Council. And then we've got Real Journeys and the Richardson Group, who are looking at heavy vehicle hydrogen transport in the South Island. So that just gives you a bit of a flavour, and there's some other projects which are more commercially sensitive, but that gives you a flavour of some of the geographical representation and the range of projects that are currently being scoped in New Zealand. Why New Zealand? Why are we able to punch above our weight on a global scale in terms of the global leaders that are progressing hydrogen and investing a lot? And they're interested in New Zealand for a range of reasons, including we're very innovative, and we're seen as innovative internationally. We're dynamic and we're versatile. We're not overtly litigious, and while that's, if you're an investor progressing innovation and want to test kit, that's an advantage. But I'm quite a fan of legislation, coming from an EU background, and I think we need it to progress this as a country in terms of improving our sustainability credentials, because voluntary is fantastic, but it won't get us over the line. So I would like to see legislation. Of course, abundant renewable, we've got expertise in renewables, we're globally iconic. Everyone wants to come here. When I travel, it's just incredible. People actually don't care what I've got to say. They just want an excuse to come to New Zealand. If it involves bringing their kit here, their hydrogen kit, then they're all the happier. So we're in an incredible position to progress, but we need to grow capability here. So in terms of how we progress to deliver the infrastructure, cars are available. Our challenge, which we're actually making good progress in, is getting New Zealand on the strategic delivery timeline of the major global corporations that are investing massively and are absolutely committed to deliver hydrogen fuel cell vehicles going forward. So we're making good progress with the likes of Hyundai Corporation and Hyundai New Zealand, and the same for Toyota Corporation and Toyota New Zealand. They're making good progress. And then buses are a challenge to get here because there is absolute global demand for the buses. I'm sure Mr. Daimler will tell us the Mercedes is already sold out, I think it's like 4 years in advance. So the next thing that I am having discussions with the corporation is that we develop domestic capability here from a bus perspective, and we bring the componentry here and build some expertise that we need. So that's the way we'll get buses on the ground. But the urban buses are off-the-shelf pieces of kit. They're used throughout Europe. The refueling infrastructure is off the kit. It's all off the shelf. It's all proven. Trucks are emerging. Light distribution trucks are in use. They're not commercially available. Heavy vehicle trucks, there is massive investment. It's not commercially available. So I guess the relevance for you guys is this infrastructure is definitely coming, and it is now the key focus of all the big multinationals. Hyundai Corporation has recently signed an agreement with a Swiss company, and they've signed up to deliver 1,000 heavy vehicle trucks. So that's sort of the level of progression that's happening, but we won't get heavy. We might get some demonstration kits here, but they're not going to be commercially available for some time yet. Possibly another, I reckon, 8 to 10 years, I'd say, for commercially available trucks. But what needs to happen prior to that is to bring the pieces of infrastructure here that are already commercially available. Is that enough? I could spend a fortnight on here. Does that help? I think we just, I'll be available for questions at the end, but I'm just conscious of time. Okay? Thanks.
Thanks, Linda. Next, we've got Sam Donaldson from Waste Management, who's going to talk to us about electrics. Waste Management has been one of New Zealand's largest truck fleets, with more than 850 trucks using more than 1,000 litres of diesel a year. 10,000 litres. Must be right. Waste Management has found itself in sustainability in a big way. They are building a fleet of electric trucks. They built the first workshop converting diesel to electric trucks here in Portland. I think they have 10 already, and they are generating biogas and electricity from landfill. They have just about every type of electric vehicle available in their company car park, from a Nissan Leaf to Toyotas to Volkswagens to a Tesla. This company is committed to investigating and investing in alternative fuels future. Please welcome Waste Management's Senior Project Engineer for EVs, Sam Donaldson.
Thank you for the introduction. So my name is Sam Donaldson. I'm the Senior Project Engineer for Electric Vehicles at Waste Management. So the technology I'm going to be talking about is battery electric vehicles, and specifically say battery electric vehicles because I think of what we're doing as kind of a sister technology to the hydrogen vehicles. You know, when it comes to using hydrogen vehicles, the electric vehicles as well, just the manner of storing energy is a little bit different. So battery electric vehicles, the future of freight. I guess a little bit provocative question. I agree with Linda in that it's not. I don't know if the battery electric vehicles are the future of freight. I am absolutely certain that they're going to be part of the future of freight. But I think the total picture of the future is going to be a combination of all the technologies we're seeing here this morning. So it's going to be very interesting to see in the next few years how it all progresses. So I'm just going to start with a very brief introduction to Waste Management Sustainability Strategy. So 2016 we published our sustainability commitments, and this is all in the public arena, and we have made promises that we were going to report on these commitments and make sure that we are achieving what we need to. So in order to do this, we have set up a website for future generations, which is the name of our sustainability strategy, and there's 5 key program areas that we're looking at. So the first one is our environment, second is our customers, third one is our people, fourth is our communities, and the fifth one is our business. Now our commitment to electric vehicles plays a part in all of these program areas. But the number one area where it has the largest effect is through reducing our emissions. So why battery electric vehicles? So our industry, the Waste Management, we have probably a little bit of a different operation to many of you. Our trucks typically run on short routes. They're sort of doing 200, maybe 300 kilometres a day on a common route, and then returning back to base at night. Now that returning back to base is a key part of what we're doing, because that enables our battery electric vehicles. They can go out, do their day's work, and they can return back to base and they can charge overnight, ready for the next day's work. So it makes this kind of technology absolutely perfect for what we're doing. So the waste industry lends itself perfectly to electrification. Not only are we returning to base for charge tonight on short routes, but we also, some of our residential collection vehicles are stopping 1,200, 1,300 times a day, and that provides a great, in terms of regenerative braking, that kind of thing. So it provides a great opportunity for us. Every time we stop, we're regenerating energy, putting it back into our batteries. Not only is that giving us further charge, but it's also reducing wear and tear on our brakes and our suspension system. So from our fleet, one electric truck, we expect to say on average about 125 litres of diesel per day, so that's sort of depending on what the truck's doing. We have a huge range of trucks. We have box body delivery vans, we have mining trucks, we have side loaders, rear loaders, and all sorts of different trucks. So, but 125 litres of diesel per day is reasonably average. So across our fleet, we're looking at sort of close to 100,000 litres a day if we can convert completely to electric. And as many of you might know, we, at many of our landfill sites, Red Vale, Whitford and Cape Valley in Canterbury, we generate electricity from our biogas, and that is then fed into the national grid. So in one day, we expect one of our, say, residential collection trucks can collect waste from 1,200 homes, collecting 16 tonnes of waste. That's over 2 trips to disposal. From that waste, we can generate 6,000 kilowatt hours of electricity, which is enough to power that truck that collects waste for the entire day, and also 275 homes for the day. So these electric trucks are a pretty important part of waste management's circular economy. I won't talk too much about circular economy, but that's kind of a general picture of what it incorporates. So our EV truck journey. So when we started on this journey, we did a bit of research, but I'm sure as many of you know, especially 4 years ago when we started this, we couldn't buy an electric truck. It didn't exist, there was nothing available. So there were a few little hybrid trucks that were available, which we have in our fleet. In order for us to actually make a start on this journey, we need to find some way of getting trucks into our fleet. So we spoke to companies all over the world, and we found a company in the Netherlands by the name of EMOS. Now, EMOS were able to provide us with the support and components we needed to be able to actually convert these trucks from diesel to electric in our own workshop. So we have a workshop set up in Lane Avenue in Auckland, and that's where we're bringing in the components and we're converting our truck from diesel to electric right here in Auckland. So the first truck we did was a simple box body truck. That's it there. That truck has been used for all sorts of purposes. It's been doing collecting food waste, doing bin swaps for foodstuffs. It's been doing bin deliveries for a residential fleet, and it has been working in our residential fleet for the last 12 months or so. This truck absolutely blew us away. When we first built this truck, we were a little bit unsure of what sort of capacity batteries we would need. So we took a bit of a punt, and we actually ended up with a truck that had a lot more range than we ever expected. So we were doing, we're looking to build trucks that will do a day's work and have just enough charge to come back and charge it overnight and go out again. This truck was easily doing 2 to 3 days work. So it was an interesting project. It did then enable us to learn more about the batteries and the way they work, and then for our future truck, being able to, I guess it's an advantage of what we're doing in terms of building our own trucks, but we can customise the size of the battery pack to suit exactly what we're doing. So, pretty interesting. So after that truck, we then went on and we converted 2 residential side load collection trucks. One and then the one here. So they're the 2 largest trucks we've converted so far. And then following that, we did a skip truck, 15-tonne skip truck and a 14-tonne rear loader. And we currently have 8 trucks on the road that are driving around and working. We have 2 that we're currently converting in workshops, so they're in various states of being converted. And then by the end of this year, we're aiming to have at least 15 electric trucks on the road. And from there, we're just going to ramp it up and convert as many as we possibly can. So we're on a pretty aggressive path to trying to electrify our entire fleet. We're actually, at the moment, we're focusing on the sort of the 11 to 16 tonne four-wheel trucks. The reason for that is we can quickly convert them. It's reasonably simple to convert these trucks, and also these trucks make up nearly half of our fleet, so it's loading, converting quickly, and really quickly make a change to the electric fleet. So driving a battery electric truck is obviously a little bit different. I'm sure many of you have driven electric cars, and it's just it's a different way of driving. So challenges come with this. So we have obviously we have a lot of drivers in our truck fleet, and then when we come to the driver and say, look, here's your new truck, it's full electric, and, oh, what am I going to do? Anyway, so operator buy-in is absolutely essential. So we spend a lot of time, once we convert a truck, we'll spend time with the driver, we'll ensure they know, understand the system, understand what we're trying to do, talk through the why it's important what we're doing. We actually have an ex-skip truck driver who works with our electric truck team, and he does all that testing and commissioning. And he's been really important to the process because he absolutely sold. Personally drove the truck, he was completely sold on the concept. So having an ex-driver who is completely bought into the process, but then speak to the other drivers, has been very important. But anyway, so once the operators are up over the initial hesitation, once they become comfortable with what they're doing and with the way the truck operates, they seem to absolutely love it. Like we've got drivers that absolutely love these vehicles. So it's a completely different thing to drive. The reason for this, they have near instant torque. We have a fully laden truck which will just take off into traffic exactly like a car and taking off intersections and things like that. The drivers absolutely love it. They're silent, completely silent, which is quite odd. Interestingly, the noisiest thing on our trucks is actually the springs moving. So it's quite a bizarre thing to hear it come to worship, is hear the springs creaking. There's no vibrations, a very comfortable drive. There's no gear changes. This is particularly important for our vehicles which are doing a lot of stop-start or they need to be moving slowly. There's no gear changes, there's no jumping in and out of gear like an automatic, it just cruises along. So very effortless, comfortable driving. So we've had very, very positive feedback, and so it's been very encouraging. Actually, there's been significantly better feedback than we probably expected. So there are many other benefits. So from what we've been doing, we believe that these electric trucks, battery trucks, are going to be absolutely perfect for metro deliveries. We're talking trucks that are doing up to 300 kilometres a day. They go out, they do their work, do their deliveries, and they return to base, and they can charge overnight. So at this time, that return to base is quite important. The trucks need time to charge. We don't charge our trucks at a super fast rate. That's intentional, but this enables us to. That just charges overnight, and by the time the truck driver comes back next morning, it's ready to go again. Obviously, significantly reduced fuel costs, so that's been a big one for us. The generative braking has been quite important for us in terms of the lock, stop, start operation. So we're seeing up to 20 and up to 30% of the energy we use will return back to our batteries and regenerative braking. So that's been really impressive as well. Reduced maintenance costs. So on our electric trucks, we're no longer doing B services, we're doing regular A checks and then a yearly C service that reduced our maintenance costs already. We're a bit over 3 years into our project, but we expect wear on brakes to be significantly less. So it's still reasonably new, so we're waiting to confirm that, but that's what our data is currently showing us. So they're expecting significantly reduced maintenance costs, and we are actually expecting a lower total cost of ownership. So over the total cost maybe a little bit more, but yeah, I think especially as we start seeing OEMs start to offer these trucks and become more available, the cost of come down. I have no doubt that the cost of ownership for these trucks is going to be less. There are a few challenges from our point of view. The biggest one has been trying to find these trucks. Obviously, there's nothing available, so we've had to go through the whole process of actually building them ourselves, which has been a challenge. From being an engineer, from my point of view, it's absolutely perfect, but it certainly is a challenge. There is a high capital cost, but as I mentioned, I expect that it's going to be offset by the fuel and maintenance costs. Availability of heavy vehicles, that's a big one. Hopefully we'll start seeing some OEMs supply some trucks reasonably soon. There's some over in Europe, but getting them actually to New Zealand is another story. Reskilling of the workforce is an interesting one. So the trucks, the electric system on the trucks obviously runs a significantly higher voltage than what the electrician is used to. So we actually have some special skills, people who are trained in high voltage systems and that kind of thing, and they have many special tools to try and to work on these trucks. The trucks themselves, good trucks are not complicated. There's only a few parts to it. You know, there's electric motors, batteries, a few controllers and inverters, and that's it. It just requires different mindset, different set of skills to work on it. We do see a slightly increased team mass on our trucks. We actually, the battery chemistry we use is lower energy density than what you would find in standard compound. There's actually we made that choice intentionally to use the ferric phosphate chemistry. Since the technology was so new, it's a more chemically stable technology, so something more of a safety thing that we went for that chemistry. But so we do see an increased TMS that would likely be reduced in the future. So we're expecting some good developments on that. So the future of battery electric trucks, increased charging infrastructure. So waste management, we're building a lot of charging infrastructure at our sites. Like every truck we deliver to any of our sites, we then ensure that there is charging infrastructure available. OEM supply trucks, that's going to be a really exciting one. We're looking forward to that. Battery technology developments, these are moving extremely fast. Even in the 3 years we've been working on our trucks, the actual physical size of our batteries have reduced by about 30%, which has been that's in 3 years, and it's enabled a lot of us to do a lot of other things with our trucks. So that's moving very quickly. Maybe there might be some new chemistries coming. Some higher energy densities, and that will allow to keep those either a greater range or lower TMS, a few other things, supercapacitors and a few other technologies which could be coming. Uses for second and third life batteries is interesting. This is a topic that comes up quite recently, quite often. Our intention, so we're in a bit of a privileged position where we're building our own trucks, so we have the ability to rejuvenate our battery packs, and then also we're beyond that. Once we've reached the end of a useful life for a vehicle, we're looking at like stationary storage and storage for solar panels, that kind of thing. So there's plenty of things happening in that space, and then after that there's work being carried out on materials recycling. Not just for batteries, but for everything else that comes along with these trucks. And, that's going to be a very interesting space as well. So that's about it from me. I think I'm going to save questions for the end, but thank you very much for listening. And if you want to follow our journey, wastemanagement.co.nz and ffg.nz. So on ffg.nz we're going to do regular updates on our sustainability strategy, and a lot of the truck stuff will be involved in that. So keep an eye on what we're doing. Thank you.
We've got Mike Bennett, the Chief Executive of Z Energy, and not only that, he's the convener of the Climate Leaders Coalition. Mike has committed Z to move from being part of a climate change problem to the heart of the solution. He says the company will be bold and provide leadership on a range of solutions to enable Z customers, stakeholders and communities to join the company on the journey to a low carbon future. Mike's going to talk on biofuels. Biofuels are made from renewable resources and is a more sustainable and cleaner burning alternative to ordinary diesel. Therefore, Z has built New Zealand's first biodiesel plant in Auckland. Please welcome Mike.
Good koutou everybody. I've gone truly sustainable. I hadn't used any electricity producing a PowerPoint slide, and I've got all my nuts on my phone. So, demonstrating our commitment to this stuff. I'll talk a little bit more than just biofuels actually. And Zed is a great person to has things to say about this, because we are definitely deeply embedded in the middle of the fossil fuels future, and there's a whole different set of pathways ahead of us going forward. So, if anyone's got a real problem in terms of like the intellectual challenge required about how do you deal with this issue, and then you've got to deal with the economics and the social and environmental impacts of the choices that you make. We're a really, really great example of just how tough it is. So with that in mind, because we're actually of limited intellectual capability, we spend quite a lot of time looking elsewhere in the world to understand what can we learn everywhere else. So as much as New Zealand's an innovative place, we're very progressive in how we think about things, and we want to get after stuff to make environmental, social and economic outcomes that the country is committed to. Actually, we lag. What I mean by that is there's a lot of things that happen elsewhere in the world that we can learn from. So I saw some stats up there about trucks. In Nicky's presentation, a good chunk of the trucks we have in New Zealand are already second-hand before they turn up here. Average car in New Zealand is 14 years old, etc., etc. So with that in mind, we looked at places like Norway to really understand what is the electric vehicle solution look like for the passenger car fleet. There's a lot of comparisons between Norway and New Zealand. 1 in every 2 cars going on the road in Norway at the moment is actually an electric vehicle. We then think about a market like Europe for biofuels. And the reason we think about that is because biofuels have been in Europe since the mid-1990s. Now, when you're as old as I am, that doesn't sound that long ago, but if you do the math, it's 25 years ago that biofuels came into Europe. So there's quite a lot of lessons to be learned from there. There's a lot of lessons to be learned from China about scale and how quickly markets can adapt. So a stat that I quite like is there's nearly 500,000 electric buses in China. 500,000 electric buses. So you really get to understand what do markets look like when they move quickly, and when you go from sort of nothing to having scale quite a lot. What are all the system challenges around that in terms of infrastructure, consumer reaction, how you put supply chains together, etc. And the last market we pay a lot of attention to is actually Singapore, because we think Singapore, and it runs a little bit like a family firm actually. Actually I live there, so I feel like I can make a comment like that. What I mean by that is they have a very, very good understanding of how to have regulations in place to shift how consumers and industries approach things. So we think for something like autonomous vehicles, Singapore is probably the most advanced in its thinking about the way in which they will regulate how these driverless cars will come on the road. So those are the markets that we look to: Norway, China, Singapore and Europe, to help us understand what our future might look like. And that's all relatively backward looking. In terms of being forward-looking, we do some work, and we have partnered up with a group here in New Zealand called the Business Energy Council. They're a subset or a group that sits within Business New Zealand, and they have done some work around what they call scenarios. And scenarios are not a forecast of the future, but they're a point of view on the future. And what the Business Energy Council in New Zealand have done is they've taken a framework from the World Energy Council, and they slightly twisted it and adapted it for New Zealand, and they come up with 2 plausible scenarios for the future. And they don't do that on their own. They invite people like Z and a number of other private and public sector organisations to participate in a roundtable discussion and input all of the modelling around what does the future look like. And they have modelled New Zealand's energy demands out to 2050. 5 years ago, they modelled the energy demand out to 2060. 5 years ago, they modelled it out to 2050. So if you like, we're updating the models at the moment. And they have 2 plausible scenarios for the future. One is, I forgot what they're called now. One is called cohesive, and the cohesive scenario says actually we're going to, in a very orderly way, transition to a low carbon future. And that will be mostly government-led. People like us will be all very responsible about what we do, and it will be relatively coordinated and unified. And the other approach is what they call individualistic, where it's sort of every person for themselves, it's all kind of messy, and we transition to this future in almost an just-in-time way. The scenarios in the past were called kayak and waka. I think that's actually a better way to describe it, because as you can imagine, in a waka scenario, we're all in the boat together rowing in the same direction, and when we're working in a kayak way, we're all going through a whole bunch of white water, fiercely fighting on our own to that sort of future. And what these scenarios do, they enable us to understand what is the mix of fuels, particularly as it relates to transport, which is the selfish piece that I'm interested in. What does the future look like? And I thought there's some stats there that I could quote for you that are somewhat similar to what people have shared as well. And this is relatively hot off the press. These scenarios actually haven't been published yet, they're just finalising the models, but because Z is part of it, we get to see the data. So what do they say? Well, the key determinant about how the freight task transitions from these filthy fossil fuels to the alternative, a key determinant of that is actually the pace of battery technology. That, as we've heard from waste management, there's a lot happening in that space. So batteries go really super quick to be really, really efficient in terms of the range that they provide them from that energy density at a really, really good price. That's likely to be something that we push harder on than perhaps hydrogen. Now, I'm not arguing one over the other. I just think that as these technologies develop, you're not going to have a winner and a loser. You're just going to have more of a bias towards one than the other. So the pace of battery technology is a really, really important determinant on how quickly things change. What they also do is they actually have some estimates of what the freight task is likely to be like in the future. I think these are quite important for this room. There's going to be a 22% uplift in the freight task between 2020 and 2040 under the cohesive model, and a 38% increase in the freight task under the individualistic model. Again, if you come back to some of the data that Nikki shared, where we said we've got to actually take where we were in 1990 and halve it, that's one challenge. But when you say the answer is somewhere between 22 and 38% more task than we currently have, and we've got to halve it, that certainly speaks to the size of the problem that we have to deal with. So generally, Zed's view is that the way of the future is going to be multiple pathways, is that the light passenger vehicle is going to be predominantly electrons, and that makes a whole lot of sense, and you can see movement around that now. That the heavy vehicle task is likely to be battery dominated post 2040, but in the interim there's a role there for hydrogen and certainly for biofuels, because we think that biofuels is quite a good transition between the old and the new, if you like, because we can pop a biofuel into a truck today. There is no need to electrify it, there's no need to change the way in which you manage all aspects of your fleet operations today. And when it comes to marine fuels and aviation fuels, we think that's likely to be sort of more about bio and electrons and a little bit less about hydrogen in the near term. The biofuels piece is actually more relevant to New Zealand than it is to many, many other markets. Now, in February 2018, Scion, so a Crown Research Institute, put out a report which they called the Biofuels Roadmap. So it was their analysis on how they saw biofuels being part of the solution or not, and what the pathway would look like. And they had three conclusions to that. The first thing they said that there is a credible pathway for a large-scale biofuels future for New Zealand, using sustainable feedstock. But what I mean by that is there's quite a large biofuels industry in, say, take the US. But what happened there is they took a whole lot of corn out of the food chain, turned it into ethanol, and then were highly subsidised by the government to turn that into a fuel. So what happened there is the price of corn went up, which affected the price that people would pay for all sorts of products in their food purchases. The good thing about New Zealand is we have a whole lot of stuff that we either leave rotting on the forest floor in terms of wood waste, or we have something like tallow, which is a byproduct of the agricultural industry that's otherwise exported overseas to be used in sort of soap manufacturing in a place like China. So what Scion said is there is a legitimate pathway to biofuels in New Zealand that is both credible and it has social and environmental impacts as well. They thought that the biofuel market was most likely to be as a diesel substitute and be used in clearly the heavy vehicle task, in marine fuels, and certainly biojet becomes quite an important thing as well, because there's quite a lot of jet fuel used in this country. Sort of 20% of what Z sells every year is actually jet fuel. It's less about diesel and petrol. And New Zealand's largest industry now is the tourism industry. So if we do not come up with a sustainable solution as a fuel for the likes of Air New Zealand, then ultimately putting our tourism market at risk. And the last thing that they concluded in terms of the biofuels work was, at one level you'd say it's not easy, but to quote their words, national strategic and corporate leadership is required to build a biofuels consensus. And what I mean by that is it requires systems thinking. It's pointless a forest owner saying, oh, I've got a whole lot of stuff rotting on the floor of my forest. It'd be good if someone could use that as a feedstock for a biofuels plant. Unless that someone like Z said, well, actually, we're willing to invest in a biofuels plant. And then someone like Air New Zealand says, actually, we're willing to pay for a biojet to be able to put that into our products. And the government at the same time might say, well, actually, what's our role in that by way of public policy or potentially even incentives or mandates? So I think the biggest challenge around biofuels is actually it's not particularly sexy right now. There's a lot of discussion around electric vehicles and increasing discussion around hydrogen, all for very legitimate reasons. I'm personally disappointed there's not the same enthusiasm for biofuels. I think certainly what Linda spoke about is the future will require a blend of all of these fuels as opposed to one being winner and therefore the others actually being losing. In terms of what Zed's doing about biofuels, we've dropped a mere $40 million into a biofuels plant here in South Auckland. $40 million is a lot of money. For a company like Z, at one level it's not a lot because we've got sort of $2 billion worth of assets on our balance sheet. So we built this plant and it takes tallow. Those of you who don't know much about tallow, it's cow fat and sheep fat that's otherwise exported to China, and we actually process that with some pretty well-proven technologies, i.e. it's a 90-year-old process that we're using, tweaked to be in a more modern, contemporary fashion. And we turn that into a really, really high-quality biofuels. So the biofuels that and it's actually a biodiesel. The biodiesel we produce meets the European standard, the US standard, and the New Zealand standard. So Z's standard for biofuels is the highest standard for all three of those. So it does things like it has improved lubricity, so that has benefits for you in terms of the maintenance on your vehicles. What we're able to do, we're able to blend that in. We call it a drop-in fuel. So we can blend the 100% biofuel into the existing diesel, and we do that at a rate of 5%. So almost overnight, we can reduce your carbon emissions by 5% by dropping that fuel into your tanks. And we take care of that for you because we put it into our supply chain, and then you just come up and you refuel with it. If you want to take the total life cycle impacts of that carbon, it's actually a 4% reduction. So if we counted all those belching cows and the cost and the carbon that comes from running the plant, we still achieve a 4% reduction when we use the 5% blend. There's some real challenges around that. I would like to acknowledge the likes of New Zealand Post, TIL, Fonterra and Downer. We face the decision when someone like I go to the board and say, I think we should invest in this stuff, and it's a 50% chance we'll make money, which means it's a 50% chance it'll be a loser for us economically. And we've got some customers who are committed to buying the product from us. That was one of the things that got us across the line. And the reason I wanted to share that is one, to acknowledge those companies, but also to reinforce the point this does require some system thinking, or the village of New Zealand to be working together if we do want to start to make these transitions to low carbon or preferably zero carbon fuels in the future. Because if we all took a very selfish perspective, if I just said, I should not be spending any of my shareholders' money developing something that's going to substitute my core business. If I did that, and then you said, I'm not going to support companies like Z by buying biofuels or moving into hydrogen or spending the R&D money to electrify your fleet, and then so it goes on, nothing actually changes at all. I think we'll realise that now we've got to do something about the climate change risk. So with our biofuels, Fonterra have been using it at 3 of their locations over the last 6 months. We've had a lot of challenges with the plant. And we originally thought we could build it for $25 million, so it's cost us $40 million. So that's one way that sort of evidence the challenge. And now the product's progressively coming to market. And in New Zealand, people like yourselves and others in New Zealand say, actually, this biofuel thing is a really good thing for us. Yeah, we're more than willing to actually invest in expanding production of the plant and indeed building other plants across New Zealand. We only use about 15% of New Zealand's available tallow. So to put it in other words, we go out and build 6 more plants before we ran out of stuff that we put in there. We've also done some work with Refining New Zealand, Air New Zealand, Scion, to come up with what would be a solution around biojet, and we came up with the answer. The technology exists, and if we could all swallow hard and spend $500 million building a plant and sell it at a loss, then we've got an absolute winner. And that's part of the challenge here. And I think, again, as I said, that requires the village of New Zealand to work together both privately and publicly and see how and ways we can mutually generate some of the solutions that make the differences required. Your proposal.
Right, we're going to keep moving here. Next we've got Peter Ryan from Daimler Truck and Bus NZ. Peter has been in the automotive industry for 20 years and now with Daimler for 10 years. He immigrated to New Zealand in 2013. He's been responsible for Freightliner and Mercedes-Benz trucks since his arrival. In March he became a Kiwi and wants to keep New Zealand the best country in the world to live and also make it a better place for future generations. The claim made about the Euro 6 standard diesel truck is that the air that comes out the exhaust is cleaner than the air that comes out is cleaner than the air in most cities. So we'll get Peter's thoughts on diesel engines in the future. Thanks, Peter.
Well, just firstly, what has been on the presentation, this has got nothing to do with the rugby. So, well, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. It's certainly a very exciting time for us, and yeah, I am the person in the room that's going to have to try and keep everyone happy. because a lot of people are looking at the OEMs in terms of what we are developing. So, so thank you for the National Road Carriers having us here, and thank you for our customers without you, I wouldn't be here. So, so here we go. So, I love the company I work for. As David said, I've been working 10 years for Daimler Trucks, and I'm very fortunate to work for a company that's investing more than most in alternative fuels and also autonomy for one, which I will not talk about today per se. But I'll stand in front of you saying that I personally want to make a difference and want to work with everyone to try and do the best for New Zealand. I've made the promise to my kids I'll move to this country and deliver a better future for them. So, and I want to be part of that. So Daimler Trucks, just to put it into perspective, Daimler Trucks globally last year sold 517,000 trucks globally. We are the number one manufacturer in the world. So in Europe, we have 20% market share with Mercedes, and in the US now 40% with Freightliner. So I trust what you take from what I say today, that it's credible and that we are a company that know what we're talking about. So, well, before I speak about Euro 6 and diesel, I think first I want to take you into the future before I can take you back, and also explain what that roadmap looks like for us. So basically, firstly, Daimler Trucks' strategy is based on innovation leadership, and there's three pillars to our strategy. So firstly, to build safe and automated trucks, to also build efficient and electric trucks, and also to be reliable and connected. So these topics will come through in my presentation quite a bit. So what that means is, I think we all wanted accident-free trucks, so we want to prevent that. Zero emissions, so we're on the same page here, and 100% uptime. And why is 100% uptime as well as you cannot have automated trucks without not being 100% reliable. We want to have a crash if our trucks are not reliable. So firstly, so the challenges for commercial vehicles strategy is to acknowledge all is key before we can take the next major leap. And I think it's come through in terms of all the speakers' presentations are we need to work with our customers to understand the range of batteries, real cost of ownership. And what does real cost of ownership mean, for example? What about resale value of trucks? When we take them back in 5 years or 6 years, there's a big question there. And also incentives from government side. Also charging infrastructure. So we will not deliver a truck without understanding our customers' needs in terms of charging infrastructure. And also Daimler is working globally with other suppliers to standardize basically charging infrastructure, plugs, all those things. So everyone's on the same page at the moment. And also payload. So yes, we've seen, like Base Manager said as well, we see an impact on payloads. For example, in the US, we've done some studies and we're basically replicating 38 ton, almost 40 ton in the US. It's about an 18 ton payload. We need a 9 ton battery to run long distance transport. So yeah, so the road to heavy EVs are long, and diesel has the job to do for now. So if you look at the sort of roadmap, to the far left, this is where we are now. So we're saying metro and distribution trucks. Yes, it's working. We started to build the e-Actros, e-Cascadia, and e-M2 in the US and Europe, and we've delivered some into key fleets, which is strictly monitored, so it's not released for the majority of the world as yet. But we do expect major production to start in 2021. So the next area is regional haul, talking about 200 plus miles range. We're working on that at the moment, again with e-Cascadia, and yeah, so that's on the page. But The future 500 plus mile range, I cannot even put a date on that necessarily. It is a huge challenge for us, potentially in New Zealand, to run a 58-ton high productivity vehicle. You're going to need an 18-ton plus battery, so with current battery technology. So what is our objectives with the electrification of transport? So make emissions-free transport feasible. Okay, we will not release technology unless it's reliable, and we also can build trucks at the same cost as a diesel truck. Currently, that cost is double. So yeah, it's not a miracle solution, but we transfer all our current diesel fleet to EVs, and there's a cost, and it's going to cost some money. So we want to work with our customers to understand that the cost of ownership in depth. So but what about diesel and emissions? What does that mean? So I mean, I thought I'd just put this in a real simple formula, and basically in every liter of diesel is 720 grams of carbon, and then when that's mixed with 1,920 grams of oxygen and combustion, you get 2,640 grams of CO2 per liter of diesel. And that is a constant formula that will not change. So the more fuel we burn, the more CO2 we produce. That is it. So talking about CO2, so then we're talking about secondary. These are other bad emissions which I'll talk about now. So this is also emissions that make us sick. So this on the left, you'll see unregulated emissions, which is CO2. We burn CO2, we use fossil fuels, that is it. But then there's regulated emissions, and particularly very critical is nitrous oxides and also particulate matter. So I think that picture shows it, that black soot that's being spit out, that is the bad stuff. So there's two parts, to this one is saving the environment, also CO2, but also the stuff that make us sick. And what are we doing about this? So, and I'm talking from a Daimler perspective. I'm not saying all manufacturers will replicate the same numbers, but we see with our Euro 6 engines, we see 7% reduction in fuel, and there's some customers here. We've seen that as well. We use 40% less AdBlue, and we see a 99% reduction in particulate matter. So that's huge. And you'll see from the graph here on the left, the black is Euro 3, then it goes down Euro 5, and Euro 6 is really noticeable in terms of the impact. So also 97% reduction in nitrous oxides. So obviously I can't share Daimer's full intellectual property, but it's quite simple. It's nothing fancy we do with electronics. We simply combine SCR and EGR technologies, and we end up with a very good result. So how do we reduce CO2 with diesel engines then? So I think the word was mentioned, pick the low-hanging fruit. And so what we've done is with Euro 6 and our drivetrain, we've designed very efficient drivetrains. So the more fuel we save, the more CO2 we can cut from the equation. And we are doing very clever things like we are polishing gears that reduces fuel consumption by 1%. The EGR and SCR combination that we use also reduces fuel consumption. And then also our drivetrain at the moment with Euro 6 in New Zealand, we've doubled our service intervals, so we're sitting at 80,000 kilometer service intervals at the moment because of less wear in the system. And also I think very critical is telematics and training. So if we want to save fuel, we should train our drivers better. I know we've got a big shortage of drivers, that is true. And I'm saying it's probably a very challenging topic, but we've seen with fleets where we go in and do training, we usually save between 7 and 10% on fuel, and that directly correlates to CO2 that you'll save. Then also we're working on aerodynamics, again saving fuel. So our new trucks coming from the beginning of next year will have no mirrors. And no mirrors basically a vinyl, for example, saves up to 2% of fuel. 2% of fuel equals 2% CO2, so less CO2, so that's directly correlated. Then also filter as much as we can. I mean, that is what it is. When you use fossil fuels, we need to stop the dirty stuff going out. So yeah, we've got some big filters in there. However, with less fuel we burn, less wear and tear there is on the system. And then also very important is lobby with government for incentives. For example, road user charges, just a couple of cents off your per kilometre rate, and at least there's an incentive for customers to move to Euro 6. And again, like I say, EVs are all working on that, but the solution is not a year away, it's not 2 years away, it's probably a little bit longer away, especially for heavy haul trucks. And then incentives for customers to change fleets, as I said. So, yeah, so really, so the question then is, how can we transition the current truck park from Euro 5 to Euro 6 or Euro 5 and 5? I mean, I checked the numbers yesterday, and saw the numbers earlier as well. I think there's 154,000 heavy trucks now on the road. Just did a quick calculation, so currently we sell 2,500 heavy trucks a year. That's all brands. We apply that 7% reduction that we've seen in our Euro 6 engines. That's a reduction of 14 million litres of fuel saved, and that equals 36,960 tonnes less of CO2. I think we all can apply that math to the rest of the fleet on the road. We can transition those vehicles through, and we will save a lot of CO2. So that's how we see the roadmap to, yes, like I said, our strategy, EVs are on the horizon. There's other few things we are working on as well. You've seen probably we run F-cell, which is hydrogen, and also battery technology. So it is all there, but we're putting a lot of effort into the electricity side. So it will come. But I think that we've seen the results, and we're convinced about it, and a lot of our customers are convinced about the results we've seen. And yeah, that's the roadmap we see. So thank you very much for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. And for the rest of the day.
Next, I'm delighted to introduce Basil Issa from the Energy Efficient and Conservation Authority, or ECA, to talk about low emissions vehicle contestable fund. The purpose of this fund is to encourage innovation and investment and to accelerate the uptake of electric and other low emission vehicles in New Zealand. At least 2 members, Waste Management and Foodstuffs, which are operating 28-tonne vehicles, have received grants under previous funding rounds. And the timing of this seminar is impeccable, as I believe the next round opens in August. So if you're thinking of getting into EVs or any other clean and green vehicles, I strongly recommend you listen to that, Basil, because he might have a deal for
you. Morning, everyone. I'll race through the presentation as I realize that we're quite short on time. Right, for you who don't know ECA, ECA is a Crown agency tasked with mobilizing New Zealanders to be leaders in clean and clever energy use. These are our brands, and electric vehicles drive the future is one that we support quite strongly. Rest of the world is charging ahead. Globally, EVs on track to exceed new car sales by 2040. ICE vehicles sales soon going to sort of reach, we're talking on light vehicle side, parity with electric vehicles. Many countries are already enacting in the law to ban ICE vehicles in Norway 2025, other places in Europe even before 2050. A lot of manufacturers are committed to switching to low emission and battery vehicles, in particular in the light fleet. And huge investments are being forward on this. Now, in New Zealand, there's a lot of exciting things on the regulatory side of things that are happening. But currently, we support the light vehicles and the heavy vehicles more so with no road user charges until the end of 2021 or until 2% of the fleet is reached. Now, we're nowhere near 2%, not even 0.5% in the heavy and the light fleet. So there is a great opportunity there, and possibly beyond 2021 as well for the heavy fleet to continue to make savings on road user charges. The curve of adoption of light vehicles is getting steeper here. We've cracked 15,000 vehicles now in the light fleet, and that's likely to continue to increase quite rapidly in the years to come. Too many graphs there. Don't look too closely at that. Just companies own 24% of the light EVs and almost all the heavy fleet. We can see there's a good case already for fleets to move towards EVs. Many of you here today would have a lot of company vehicles in addition to the delivery trucks, and there is already a good case to switch to light company fleet. Yes, there are some challenges. The distance the vehicles travel, the access to charging infrastructure, and the cost. But there are many benefits in addition to the environmental benefit, the cost savings, and the use of less fuels. Charging infrastructure is growing rapidly in New Zealand, and we've got coverage almost all the main highways. Every 75 kilometers there is a fast charger. The alpine routes are presently a challenge, but we're hoping to work together with some private industry to cover that area. The range as well in light vehicles is increasing. Maybe the earlier models of the Nissan Leaf didn't have too much of distance, but a lot of the new models now, they 200 plus kilometers quite comfortably. Now, the Low Emission Vehicle Contestable Fund is one of the government initiatives that is administered by ECA, and the purpose is to encourage innovation investment that will accelerate the uptake of electric technology in vehicles. The government is committed to this program, and we're putting $7 million a year. That's on 2 rounds, and we're co-funding up to 50% and up to $500,000 per project. The central government is excluded, and as you can see so far, 17 million being spent in 5 rounds, and this is sort of a list of the projects. Charging infrastructure, about 35. Vans, cars, trucks, buses, technology, car share, camper vans, training, etc. So these basically projects that need the co-funding because they're not financially viable. We're happy to look at these projects to assist. Round 6 is about to be announced in the next couple of weeks, and that will open up round 7. The investment focus for the projects, identifying gaps in the charging network. We understand that it's really important to promote electric vehicles uptake is covering those gaps for charging network and reducing the barriers for fleet sector and public transport, encouraging the uptake in sectors where EV remains relatively unproven. And the heavy vehicle projects are really important. We've supported a few of them, but it's an area that we would like to explore further. Encouraging EV technology innovation, example vehicle to grid, and smart charging to reduce peak electricity demand, which is another area that the government is looking closely at the moment. Supporting the EV maintenance, repair support services. We have supported waste management with building their conversion workshop. And this is basically a subsidy, it's not a subsidy, it's a demonstration fund. So for new ideas to commercialize them. What's covered and what's not. Basically, this is a fund that covers roadworthy vehicles registered for the road, not off-road. So we not cover forklifts, off-road vehicles, biofuel vehicles, or three-wheel vehicles, etc. in this list you see there. The process, 2 funding rounds per year, as I mentioned, total $7 million, and round 7 opening in 4 weeks, mid-August to mid-September. And the assessment takes about 6 weeks, and the approval and contracting 6 to 8 weeks. If a board would approve the next round 7, by mid-December, just before Christmas. For question you'll need to answer in your RFP. How does your project contribute to the objectives of the fund? And how does it fit the investment focus? And what is your ability to deliver? And what value for money does your project deliver? So all these details available on our website. And we have additional resources as well that you can get in there, all the current approved projects and briefing on every project and what it achieved. For more information, you can visit the website, levfund@eca.government.nz. Thank you very much for listening.
Righto, so I'm aware we've run out of time here. We're going to have a Q&A session now with Nick Leggett, the CEO of Road Transport Forum, but unfortunately I think really we're out of time and I can see some of you need to get going. So, but all I'd say is that the Road Transport Forum, like NRC, is committed to sustainability in the future, so we're working closely with them. But maybe I'll ask, we won't bring the panel up, but because we're going to do, but can I ask, is there any questions for the speakers? Yes, do we need a microphone or
the doctrine arrives to support the viability of hydrogen based on price, produced by renewable energy,
So currently, for use in light passenger vehicles or specifically for heavy vehicles?
Well,
across the board.
idea about what the
So at the moment, there's absolutely not cost parity, so I can be really clear on that. It's expensive because the technology is new, so compared to the I've got a big mouth and big lungs. Yeah, to recap, it's expensive at the moment, so there isn't cost parity. That gives you clarity. In certain scenarios where you've got the right scale and for green hydrogen, and you can get a good price for electricity without transmission costs, it looks much more attractive. But what I will say that the key focus at the moment for the entities that are progressing investment in projects is to put them at the forefront of growing the skill set and the capability, and to improve or make significant advances in their sustainability credentials. and predominantly to be at the forefront of what's unfolding. But from a global perspective, and this is why it's important for New Zealand to position itself to be a part of that global progress, is that there is huge investment in R&D to decrease costs, increase scale, and progress an international tradable commodity for hydrogen. And then if we're in a position where we're at the forefront of those innovations and involved in the progression of that international R&D and work, that's what puts us in a position to take advantage of all those cost decreases, and then it's a much more attractive proposition across the board for hydrogen to be a part of our transition to a low emission economy. So your specific question is what are the costs? They are still expensive if you compare the direct cost of vehicles with what we currently have on our roads. So I have to be honest. I think that's a fair response to the question.
Excellent. Any other questions? Actually, I've got one for Linda too. On the understanding that electric is probably more for your around town metro vehicles and possibly heavy vehicles in the future, the distance is going to be hydrogen. But we heard Mike saying that he thinks hydrogen is maybe an interim in between before everything's electric. So maybe you want to have your thoughts on that.
I think no one's got a crystal ball. I think there's a lot of everybody is looking to make progress on these issues. It's not, it is a global concern. I think I can speak from a hydrogen perspective. What's fundamentally driving the advancement of hydrogen technology and the investment is it plays a wide range of roles in the total energy system, and that's what will drive the progress for hydrogen. So if you look at globally, what we're trying to do is transition from our reliance on fossil fuels, to a large extent around electricity production. So the world is transitioning to solar and wind. So because there's been huge investment in decreasing costs, increasing efficiency of those two things, you've got a huge uptake. That's what's resulted. But all of those are intermittent. So you need storage. So that leads then to a huge investment in battery and hydrogen, because we've got a problem with storing that intermittent energy for use across economies. And we're lucky that we don't need to invest a huge amount in our storage of our renewable capacity, but that is what is driving the cost down for hydrogen, and we can capitalise on that for our domestic economy to transition to low emission, but also important for us is be positioning ourselves for the global investment in exportable renewable energy, and we've got oodles of renewable capacity, and that's what hydrogen is about for New Zealand. But in terms of the tracking going forward, hydrogen will definitely play a role in the mix. I'm happy to say that quite confidently.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. I've been speaking in cost. I think the question might be moving from Euro 5 to Euro 6. Have we seen increase in cost? Euro 6 technology is more expensive. Yes, the vehicles cost a little bit more. But actually, we've been able to absorb that. And we are competing, obviously, in the market with current Euro 5 vehicles. We're still tooling as well. We make no changes in tooling as well. So really, it's business as usual for us, going from Euro 5 to Euro 6. Just wanted to clarify that.
Okay, must be another question. One more and then we'll wrap it up.
It's Richard Bart of Share the Road campaign. Basil, with the reduction on access to a lot of CBD locations and the need for last mile delivery of goods, why are 3 or 4 wheeled vehicles such as cargo cycles excluded from the contestable fund?
Are they road legal?
Sure.
Like, they're registered? For the road?
No.
Yeah, I mean, that's the limitation of the fund currently. It could be reconsidered when the 5 year of this fund is finished and is being renewed. We've been asked about micro-mobility, like e-bikes and other forms of mobility. But it has been from day one when it was instituted as full road legal vehicles for that purpose. I see your point, and there's a lot of savings that can be made with lighter form of vehicles. But yeah, we'll have to look after it in the future.
Thanks, Basil. I'm sorry, I apologise that we have gone over time, but I actually think it's been well worth every minute of it. We've had some very good, informative speakers, so I thank you all for that. The future is changing, and it is going to change fast, and I think it's up to us as an industry to change with it. Otherwise, you'll be left behind. What else do I have to say? Particular thanks to Teletrack Navman for their sponsorship today. And as I said earlier, National Road Carriers wants to take a lead in sustainability and environmental issues, and we want to be able to inform the industry and our members of what those changes are and help you make those future decisions of what you need to be doing in that area. So thanks again for everyone for coming. The speakers, I'm not too sure what their time limits are, but they may be here for a little bit longer if you need to talk to any of them. So thanks everybody, and I hope you enjoyed the breakfast.